In 905, a crowd gathered in central France to hear a speech. They did not know they were about to help ignite 2 centuries of war. They thought they were about to hear a sermon. When Pope Urban II spoke at the Council of Clermont, he described something both urgent and sacred. Christian pilgrims, he said, were being harassed in the Holy Land. Jerusalem, the city of Christ's crucifixion, was under Muslim control. Eastern Christians were asking for help against advancing Turkish forces. And then he offered something extraordinary. Fight, and your sins will be forgiven. Not metaphorically, completely. For a medieval audience that believed deeply in heaven, hell, and purgatory, this was not just politics, this was eternity. The response, according to chroniclers, was immediate. God wills it, they shouted. But here's the uncomfortable truth. When the Crusades began, everyone involved believed God was on their side, and that is what made them so dangerous. To understand why tens of thousands of people would leave their homes and march across continents, you have to understand the medieval mindset. Religion was not a private belief. It was the structure of reality. Kings ruled by divine approval. Illness could be punishment. Victory could be proof of righteousness. If something happened, God had allowed it. So when Jerusalem fell to Muslim forces centuries earlier, Christians in Western Europe saw it not just as geopolitical change, but as spiritual loss. Meanwhile, the Islamic world saw something entirely different. Jerusalem had been under Muslim control since the 7th century, when armies inspired by the new faith of Islam expanded rapidly out of Arabia. For Muslims, Jerusalem was also sacred, home to the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock, associated with the Prophet Muhammad's night journey. It wasn't a stolen city, it was part of their civilization. By the late 11th century, the Byzantine Empire, the eastern continuation of the Roman Empire, was weakening. After a devastating defeat to the Seljuk Turks at the Battle of Manzikert in 1071, Byzantine territory shrank dramatically. The Eastern Emperor asked the Pope for military assistance. He likely expected mercenaries. He got a holy war. Urban II saw opportunity. If Western knights fought in the East, he could unite Christian Europe under papal authority. He could also potentially heal the schism between the Roman Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church. Political advantage wrapped in religious language. And so the First Crusade began. But it did not begin cleanly. Before organized armies even departed, mobs of peasants and minor knights set off on their own in what became known as the People's Crusade. Many of them never made it to the Holy Land. Along the way, some turned their fury on Jewish communities in Europe, massacring civilians in the Rhineland. They believed they were purifying Christendom before reclaiming Jerusalem. The irony is painful. A campaign launched to protect Christian pilgrims began with attacks on innocent neighbors. By 1096, more structured armies led by European nobles marched east. Against expectations, they succeeded. After brutal sieges and immense suffering, Crusader forces captured Jerusalem in 1099. What followed was slaughter. Contemporary accounts describe streets running with blood. Muslims and Jews inside the city were killed indiscriminately. For the Crusaders, this was divine justice. For those inside the walls, it was catastrophe. The victors established Crusader states, small European-controlled kingdoms in the Middle East, including the Kingdom of Jerusalem. For a brief moment, it seemed as though God had confirmed the Crusaders' mission. Victory meant righteousness. Except the story did not end there. Muslim leaders did not see the Crusaders as holy warriors. They saw them as foreign invaders occupying land that had been part of the Islamic world for centuries. And eventually, Muslim resistance coalesced under powerful leaders. One of them was Saladin. Saladin united Muslim forces across Egypt and Syria and gradually pushed back against the Crusader states. In 1187, at the Battle of Hattin, his army decisively defeated Crusader forces. Soon after, Jerusalem fell again, this time back into Muslim control. Unlike the Crusaders in 1099, Saladin did not massacre the city's inhabitants. He allowed many to leave or ransom themselves. In Europe, the loss of Jerusalem was devastating. Another crusade was called, then another, then another. The Third Crusade brought figures like Richard the Lionheart of England into the conflict. He fought fiercely, earning respect even from his enemies. But despite military successes, he failed to retake Jerusalem. A truce was negotiated. Christian pilgrims could visit the city, but it would remain under Muslim control. Still, the crusading movement continued, not because it was consistently successful, but because it became institutionalized. Popes called crusades not only to the Holy Land, but against heretics in Europe, against political rivals, against cities that defied papal authority. The word crusade began to mean something broader, a sanctified war. Perhaps the most tragic example of this transformation was the Fourth Crusade. Launched in 1202, it was supposed to target Muslim-controlled Egypt as a strategic step towards reclaiming Jerusalem. Instead, due to debts and political manipulation, Crusaders diverted to Constantinople, the capital of the Christian Byzantine Empire. In 1204, Crusader forces sacked the city. They looted churches, they desecrated relics, they attacked fellow Christians. A crusade turned into a Christian-on-Christian catastrophe. For Byzantium, it was a devastating blow from which it never fully recovered. For the idea of holy war, it was a moral collapse. Yet even after this, the crusading ideal persisted. Children's crusades, northern crusades, campaigns in Spain, the concept of fighting for God's direct approval endured. From the Muslim perspective, the Crusades were invasions that eventually faded. From the European perspective, they were epic struggles of faith. But both sides believed something deeply similar. They believed victory revealed divine favor. This is where the Crusades become less about territory and more about certainty. When leaders claim God supports their cause, compromise becomes weakness. Negotiation becomes betrayal. Doubt becomes sin. If God is with you, then your enemy must be wrong. Not politically wrong, cosmically wrong. And if your enemy is cosmically wrong, violence feels justified. The Crusades were not simply clashes of civilizations. They were clashes of convictions. It's important to remember that neither medieval Christians nor medieval Muslims thought they were villains. Both sides believed they were defending sacred space. Both sides believed they were responding to aggression. Each side interpreted events through a religious lens. And because religion shaped law, identity, and power, war became sanctified. Over time, the Crusades lost momentum. Muslim powers consolidated, European priorities shifted, trade between the Mediterranean worlds resumed and even flourished in certain periods. Ironically, the Crusades increased contact between cultures. Ideas, goods, technologies, and texts moved across borders. European exposure to Islamic scholarship in medicine, mathematics, and philosophy contributed to intellectual developments back home. So even in conflict, exchange occurred. But the violence left scars. Jewish communities remembered the massacres in Europe. Muslim chroniclers remembered the fall of Jerusalem. Eastern Christians remembered the betrayal of Constantinople. The memory of the Crusades lingered long after the battles ended. In modern times, the Crusades are often simplified. Sometimes they are framed as noble pilgrimages, sometimes as early colonial aggression, sometimes as inevitable religious conflict. The reality is more complicated. They were fueled by genuine belief. They were shaped by political ambition. They were sustained by economic interest. And they were intensified by leaders who knew how to merge faith with power. When Pope Urban II called for the First Crusade, he likely believed he was serving God. When knights marched east, many likely believed they were saving their souls. When Muslim leaders fought back, they believed they were defending sacred lands. No one thought they were the villains. And that is what makes the Crusades enduringly unsettling. They show what happens when certainty overrides restraint, when faith merges with fear, when political goals are wrapped in sacred language. Because if God is on your side, there is no higher court of appeal. There is no negotiation with eternity. The Crusades lasted roughly 2 centuries. They reshaped the Mediterranean world. They contributed to the decline of Byzantium. They strengthened certain European monarchies. They deepened divides between religious communities. And they left behind a legacy that still echoes in political rhetoric today. But perhaps the most important lesson is this. The Crusades were not fought by monsters. They were fought by people convinced they were right. People who believed heaven approved their cause. History rarely moves because people think they are evil. It moves because people think they are justified. In the medieval world, justification came from God. And when everyone believes God is on their side, compromise becomes nearly impossible. The Crusades were not inevitable. They were choices.
repeated, reinforced, sanctified. They remind us that belief is powerful, that faith can inspire generosity and courage, but also violence. And when certainty becomes absolute, even sacred intentions can lead to devastation.